Okay, so we are restarting. I won't start with everything again. I'll just say that we're speaking today about knowledge retention, not tutoring people, not educating you how to do knowledge retention, what the methodology is, but going into a deeper level of knowledge retention and trying to share with you our tips from our company, how we get to the tacit knowledge within these activities. So this is the session today. I will be leading it, and I think that this is time for me to share my screen. So just a moment, here we are. Vincent, do you see our screen, my screen?
Yes, everything is good.
Okay, so I think that everything is set, and now it's time to begin. So I'll start with a story. And this is maybe even rather a funny story, but it's not really funny because I think it's deep. And I want to start with my first knowledge management project in a company that is a leading manufacturer of advanced radio frequency over fiber solutions. I didn't understand anything on the topic those days. And I'm in this company and I get all kinds of tasks that have to do with knowledge management. And the CEO every time says, speak with him, speak with her, speak with it. And there are occasions where I understand the story, but one day he sends me to speak with a shipment lady. And the first question I ask him, it's a very small company, something like 60 people. And he asked me to go and speak with her and get her knowledge. And I'm thinking to myself, when I worked up till today, I was working with engineers because that's the majority of the company. I was working with salespeople because that's the other big department. But there are 1 to 2 shipment people. What does it matter? Why is it so important? And I asked the CEO, why is you sending me to the shipment lady? And he says, you know what? We first of all our products are for export. Nothing stays here in Israel. A. B, there are always problems of the last minute, and always things go after time, at the last minute, at the last second. So we need this lady to be a very creative one in order to find the right combination of shipment that will work so that even if we ship things after time, they will arrive at time. I said, okay, now I understand. And he sends me to, I didn't know the words, but in our words, in our terms, to capture her tacit knowledge. And I go to this lady and I start asking her, how do you decide? And she comes back again and again with one sentence. It's a judgment call. Now, why am I saying it's funny? Because the first project I have on knowledge management, 26 years ago, nearly, it was June 26 years ago. And it's one of the most complicated topics. And I think that I succeeded because I didn't know that it's complicated, because I didn't know that I'm supposed to be afraid of it. And I'm starting to ask her, and I'll get here to the bottom line. The bottom line was that within an hour, I had something very important based on her tacit knowledge. We'll come back to it later. I think that I started telling you this story when we opened the course. Now I'm going one step further, and we'll go back to it in the continuing of this session. Keep it in mind, within 1 hour, important knowledge that was tacit was revealed and even codified, may I say. We'll come back to it. So I want to go back to the context of our meeting today. We can share knowledge all week, all day, all career. But when people leave, the need is very, very acute, very, very important, very, very critical, may I say. And it's important to capture the tacit knowledge in order to create the business value, or may I say, to prevent or at least minimize the business loss. So we know the situation and there's nothing new here. I want to explain why it's much more important. I want you to have this in mind when you do your next KM retention activity, because as to Bennett and Bennett, we have a change here in the past 20 years. If they look at the portion of surface knowledge, shallow knowledge, and deep knowledge, these are terms that Alex spoke about a few sessions ago, and it's really easy to understand. Surface is what is outside, what we see on the iceberg. So it's usually explicit or between explicit and implicit. The tacit knowledge may be shallow, very close to the water surface, or maybe deep. So the old paradigm speaks about it that 25 years ago, 24 years ago, the greatest portion was of explicit knowledge. Therefore, knowledge retention wasn't that big issue. However, and I don't, we'll use the WhatsApp, not WhatsApp, the Zoom chat. Please write on the Zoom chat if the shallow knowledge was something like 25%, even less, 20% 20 years ago. How much you think is the proportion now? Let's just make it even easy. How much is the shallow knowledge? How much is the shallow knowledge? Let's take this question. Or how much is the tacit knowledge? These two together. How much is the tacit knowledge and how much is the explicit knowledge? Here we had explicit something like 70% and 30% the tacit knowledge. How much do you think it is now? And let's see what you are thinking. So we get here that today the tacit knowledge is, 16, 15, 85, 50, 40, 70, 25, 25, 50, more than 50, 70, 50, 50, 60, 40, 15, all the answers almost. And I'll show you what Bennett and Bennett think. They think, and they have here, they're speaking about a nominal shift. And they're speaking about something that is, as they understand it now, together, it's 80%. So this is not a research. It is very complex to prove such a thing. But if you know Alex and if you would know David, it is not, they came up and said, that's a good figure, so let's use it. They based it on all kinds of things. They based it on the communication and learning via the internet. They based it on the type of environment we have today and more things. And of course, I think that we should base it also on technology. But there are two important lessons from here. The first lesson would be that tacit knowledge cannot be ignored. It's more than 70%. It's nearly 75% or 74% of the knowledge. Let's say even more than 70. And the second lesson is that maybe it's less complex than we would think. Because when we think about tacit knowledge, we usually think about the deep one. However, the main portion is shallow. So our chances of, that was not my mistake. That was my mistake. So our chances of extracting it, capturing it, revealing it, and doing something with it is higher than we would imagine, because there is a lot of tacit knowledge, but a great portion of it is shallow and not deep. I'll continue. So we have a good starting point, saying that tacit knowledge is important, and revealing tacit knowledge is maybe less complex than we thought. When we go to knowledge retention activities, we have many problems, many challenges. We speak about time to share. We speak about fear of sharing. When we speak about the expert, the challenge to capture his tacit knowledge or her tacit knowledge, even if they say, yes, we'll help you, we want to help you, we want to be with you. It's not that easy. We speak about the belief of some of them, the belief that knowledge cannot be transferred. We speak about, and even if we would extract it, who said they'll use it? But in this specific session that is titled Knowledge Retention, I'm going back to the name of it. It's capturing the tacit knowledge, and we're trying to leverage the business value creation through the knowledge retention. And therefore, we are not looking at this session on all these challenges. We are only looking on this challenge. And I will now focus only on this session, on this challenge. So before I come up with some ideas, I want to send you to breakout rooms. We'll take 8 minutes or 10 minutes, and we will ask you to share your best practices on how to capture tacit knowledge. So I'll stop this for a minute. We will open our Miro board. So here we are, this is our Miro board, and I don't have myself to help me, so I'll copy the link to this to our chat. And now you first of all have the Miro board of this frame. And now I will send you to breakout rooms, so you know where you are. Have fun. I hope to learn also from your ideas. Is Faiz with us? To recording. So when I look at, okay, I'll start before with a sentence. Everything we learned in previous sessions is relevant also today. So I saw here on our Miro board, people speaking about the importance of coaching, the importance of questions, asking questions, the importance of mentoring. Fully agreed. Today, we're trying to give specific additional ideas. A. B. People spoke here about the infrastructure, about the culture. Hooray, very important. A culture of trust, a culture of incentives, soft incentives, other incentives, a culture where people understand the importance of sharing knowledge. When I look at any discipline or any subdiscipline in KM, I see 4 levels. The first are the approaches. When we speak about culture, that's part of the approach, how we look at KM. And this will be the same for knowledge retention and for lessons learned and for other things. So fostering a culture of trust or of knowledge sharing will be there. Then there are all kinds of methodologies. We'll find them lessons learned and communities of practices and ARs and ongoing documenting and action learning sessions. That's very short. Wonderful. Great answers, and that's on the second level. I'll skip to the fourth level, using tools. There are here ideas, for example, use mind map. Very important. That's a great tool that can help us when we speak about tacit knowledge. In addition to that, there's another layer. I spoke about 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, approaches, methodologies. Number 4 was tools, and in between are best practices. And best practices is probably the most complicated, the most deep part of our understanding of any discipline. So as I assume that you are already knowledge managers and you understand in knowledge retention, I want to focus on the time that is left, in addition to things that have been written and some of the things that have been written to repeat, and focus the time on the knowledge, on knowledge retention, best practices. And in order to do so, I'll share my screen again. Here we go. And I want to speak about sharing my or our best practices on capturing tacit knowledge through knowledge retention activities. So when I'm saying our, so I'm replacing my hat because most of you know me as the KMGN representative, but behind the scenes, I also work in a company, I'm global, and we have a full 4 layers, as I said, of approach, methodology, tools, and best practices that deal with several issues. Those that deal with knowledge retention are branded as key sure. That's what you see here. They are the key. So the organization is sure. And one of the things that we've done there, we've built our knowledge bases with our lessons, with our learnings, with our best practices on different disciplines. One of them is a knowledge retention. And we have our knowledge retention, something like 64 or 5 best practices. And I extracted some of those that have to do with tacit knowledge. And on these, I'm basing my discussion. So I'll start with something that sounds simple, but I think that we not always do it, but it's mandatory in order for us to succeed. Time. If we don't have enough time, it is lucky if we get to the tacit knowledge. Brave, smart, clever as we are, if we don't have enough time, we won't get systematically to enough tacit knowledge. Not like I said, I had one component. Having the full picture or having a good enough picture, we never have the full picture. So you need the time. You have to ensure the budget. Now, that doesn't mean that we need more budget. If I take, for example, the Volkswagen methodology, they speak about 12 hours for everyone who retires. So I tell you, take that budget and use it creating. For the regular people, take only 1 or 2 hours. Take the hours that are left and you put them in the experts. So you need the time. And when you have the time, you can focus also on the critical people, on the experts, and also on the critical, I see that I have a mistake. Focus on the right people and focus on the critical knowledge topics. I'll fix it before I send it out to you. So before I start, in order to get to the tacit knowledge, we need the time. And the critical knowledge, of course, is the core knowledge, the knowledge that is strategically that strategically impacts the business performance and needs in the perspective of the organization, not what the expert thinks. In perspective of future examination, what the organization will need tomorrow and what was not the critical knowledge today or yesterday. And think in the eyes of those who need it. So there are a lot of tips here in one tip. So that is the opening. And the last thing about the time is you have to manage not only get the right time, the right packaging of the time for the experts, but you have to very carefully manage the time that we don't waste it on the explicit knowledge. And I'll show you how. So before I started, I just want to say we must be very serious with the time, because it's not something that comes out with no effort. Second thing, when we want to get to the tacit knowledge, what we do nowadays, what we didn't do before, is we as the facilitators use generative AI. We prepare by asking ourselves what could be good directions to open and to ask, and where can we be ask deeper. So it's not that we are not dynamic through the sessions, listening to what the expert is saying, but we prepare ourselves so that we really know where to dive deep when we speak with the expert, with him or her. If we have someone who also can cooperate with us, we can send him or her also to use generative AI and prepare themselves. The portion of tacit knowledge when they and we prepare themselves up front is much higher. Questions? So let's go on. Two things. First of all, we need the time, but we start with much more knowledge, with many ideas where we can dive deep. Now, this can sound very, trivial. Use templates. Yes, of course we use templates. What template do you use? So I would say that there are 3 levels of templates. The most simple template could be, okay, let's list all the activities and tasks and best practices and contacts of the one who's leaving. Okay, but that's not interesting. That won't bring us to the tacit knowledge. A higher level of templates would be, okay, you have an IT manager, use a template for IT managers. That way you will have a better coverage of the topics. You have a procurement person, use that template. That's okay for coverage, but that also won't bring us to the tacit knowledge. So when I'm speaking about templates, I'm speaking about the third level of the third layer of templates. And these are templates that help us deep in. Now you can take all what was taught last time even about asking questions. You can take what was taught 2 weeks ago about feeling the gestures and the knowledge that's not spoken. You can take every idea you want, but if you prepare templates that are based on deepening, you have a better chance of going deep. And I'll show you an example of such template. When we're speaking about a dilemma, what is a dilemma? A dilemma is a situation where we have a conflict between 2 values or 2 things that we want to achieve, and we can't have them both. So it can be 2 values, or it can be 2 objectives, and having them both, or even more than 2, may conflict one another. And that's why we are in a dilemma. So if, for example, we have this template, and I tried putting it here together, and we use it, and we ask the expert as to dilemmas. So we have here parts in the, so we're going first of all to a deep place where there is tacit knowledge. And now we're asking the right questions or helping ourselves to ask the right questions. For example, not only tell me a story, a typical case, but explain what are the alternatives and what would be the criteria list that you will consider, because there's no one answer here. It's not what did you do in this scenario. If you have a dilemma on whether to go deep or to go broad to many directions, what would be the considerations? Can you check it better? What tools can you use? Very important, what is the cost of the mistake if you choose the wrong alternative? That helps the knowledge, the tacit knowledge. We're helping them to make patterns of their knowledge, taking what they're doing and defining it, conceptualizing it. What guidelines would you give to do immediately? Of course, case studies, external, etc. So there's no solution here. We're not looking for a solution when we're speaking about dilemmas. We're speaking about how to handle the dilemma, because there's no one decision for any dilemma. That is that is how we get through third layer templates to deep knowledge. And this is only one example. Of course, there are examples for problem solving and for additional diving deep templates. I'll go on. Next one, I have 10. So now we are at 4. This is one I love. We are all familiar with the Bell distribution curve. Now, think with yourself. Be honest with yourself. When you go to an expert and you start speaking with him or her, don't you go to the middle? Don't you go to the mainstream? The mainstream, dear people, is less interesting, because the mainstream is probably the processes that everyone knows. The mainstream is reflected in the SOPs. The mainstream is maybe reflected in the software systems that we use, in the documents we already have. So the mainstream is important to speak about only 2-3 minutes in order to understand the idea. But the majority of the time, when we're speaking about a process or any specific topic, should go to the extreme, to the edges. That is where the juicy, in a good way of sensing, exists. That is where the tacit knowledge exists. So when you go to the edges, when you think about it and you're always aiming to the edges, mainstream only 2-3 minutes, so we get the right orientation. And if you prepared yourself with generative AI, it's much easier. Go to the edges. I want to continue. We have 20 minutes until end. We spoke about questioning. We had several sessions that spoke about asking questions. And I'm not going to repeat everything that was said, because I know that everyone listened to the meeting, and I see that there's a question here. Okay, so it's not important. I can continue. So when we ask, there are a few levels of questions are important. The first one would be layman questions. Sometimes if you come as asking the most simplest questions, I didn't understand. What did you mean? You make the expert stop and rethink. So there are never WH questions in the means of who, when, where. That's not what I mean. But layman questions have the ability to make, when you ask the correct questions, what did you mean here? What is it? Can you explain it? I don't see the picture. Can you codify it, explain it, organize it better? You will be surprised. In addition, I see you have the rationale questions, the why questions. Okay, that's the way to do it. Why? Because that. But why? So we're using the why technique. I won't say 5 why, but maybe 1 why or 2 why, in order to understand rationale. And there we have, many times we have the deep tacit knowledge. And the third one would be using critical thinking questions. Was there any other option? Other situations which is not maybe the best way to act, etc., etc. So these are critical questions that may recheck our basic assumptions. So these are 3 types of questions that help us in order to reveal the tacit knowledge. I don't want to speak about it too much because we spoke a lot about questioning of all kinds and all types. I want to continue to number 6. We want to help people drive connection between the conscious and the unconscious. I'm reminding you of what Alex has told us. When we drive these connections, tacit knowledge floats up. So now we know what we do. That's the easy part. Just remember why you're doing it. That's why we ask people to share not stories, but listen to the additional word, interesting stories. Because interesting stories include the extreme examples. They include cases where there is tacit knowledge that is important, and therefore, because we don't only want to remember what happened, not interesting. What is interesting is to get to new patterns, to get also to the deep knowledge, to get to ideas. So when we ask people to drive connection of conscious with unconscious, we want to get to the deeper knowledge and get the greatest business value creation out of it. So we ask them, what was the most interesting story you remember? No, not share with me a story. We ask them, I'm giving you another example of something that takes us when we try driving the conscious with the unconscious, connecting them together. We ask them if they remember somewhere, some occasion, some situation, some context where they had to take a risk. Again, we have here a better chances of revealing important tacit knowledge, not only tacit knowledge. Because when we speak about the shallow tacit knowledge, some is more important and some is less. But as much as I told you that it's easy because a lot is shallow, I'm trying to dive deeper to the deep knowledge. And we ask them, and that would be another way to reveal the unconscious and the tacit knowledge by connecting the unconscious with the conscious, but the important ones. We ask them as surprises. Do you remember in your career when someone surprised you? You were surprised in what you saw in the laboratory, in the experiment? That's where we have a chance of getting to the better tacit knowledge. Surprises, risk-taking, stories, but not just stories, the interesting stories. So we're going through all kinds of situations where there are chances for deep knowledge that can be floated up to shallow, and from there even to explicit on the surface, using the technique of driving connections. So I believe that you are aware of the technique, but I'm trying to give you some of our tips, how we do it in a better way in order to get to the better, most important critical knowledge in order to minimize the risk of the organization tomorrow. Let's continue. This is an easy one. I think that I don't have even to explain it. In some occasions, not always it's relevant, we ask the expert to organize presentations on some specific topics that matter. Why? 2 reasons. Anyone can guess? I love the balloons that come up when I have the 2. It's a feature of the Mac when I'm on conferences. So 2 reasons I have, not the balloons. That's not a reason. That's only a bonus. The first is that every one of us, when we have to write a presentation, if we have to write a document, a presentation is even more relevant. We sharpen our knowledge. Why is a presentation even more relevant? Because when we write a document, we can write lines and lines and lines and lines and pages after pages. When we have to be concise, we have to think more. And when we think more, we get more opportunities for reaching our tacit knowledge. So that's one reason why it's important. Second reason, because when we organize these presentations, it's not that I said that we ask the expert to prepare a presentation. We want him to speak about it with an audience. And when there is an audience asking questions, have additional chances, additional opportunity for tacit knowledge capturing. So 2 reasons, but only where it's relevant. And you can't do it on all because even though I said we have time, not so much time. Let's continue to the next. I used this 2 days ago. I'll share with you. I lead a company of over 30 people, so I don't do too many knowledge retention activities myself. However, now we have a very important company organization where the CEO is leaving. And when the CEO is leaving, the CEO is the one that has to come and visit him and do the knowledge retention. So yesterday and last week, I took my feet and stopped sitting near the Zoom and near my desk, and I went to speak with the CEO. And what I asked him, what were his personal values? What were his professional values? What were his managerial values? I didn't ask it in so many ways that drive the way he works. And then I asked how it's reflected in the things he does. And when I started speaking with him about his values, whether professional, managerial, or personal, and I didn't codify it so much because it's too complicated for him, I'm just sharing it with you. All of a sudden, we started speaking about tacit knowledge because he had to reflect, what are my values? How does it explain what I do? So when you speak with experts, so maybe if it's not manager, so I wouldn't ask him, maybe if it's a professional, an engineer, maybe I speak only about his professional values. What is his compass? That would be the same. So maybe if you're speaking with an engineer or CTO, you're speaking about their compass. It's the same thing. Those are his profession or her professional values. So I speak with them on values. Tacit knowledge flows out. Okay, this will be surprising because what you see here, the image you see here is of fabrics. Fabrics, one on the other, one on the other. And I want to share with you a story. A few years ago, we were invited to a big fabrics corporation, and We are told that there is two people who are leaving now, and they want to retain, to capture their knowledge. But the HR VP, the VP of HR, she's all the time saying, no, but this guy, you can't capture his knowledge. He's a specialist. Every time, so I said, what is he in charge of? One thing, ideation. But when I say ideation, it's not collecting the ideas of everyone, writing them down, managing the ideas that are pop up. Not at all. Totally 180 degrees, other direction. So what is he in charge of? When they have a new customer that wants a special solution, let's say something that is also very thin and very light, but very strong. So any special customer that comes up with special requests, they go to the specialist, to this expert, and ask them, okay, so how do we do it? And I says, okay, and how does he does it? He doesn't know. He just comes up with an idea. Okay, so why am I sharing you this story? Because we had a solution. We didn't really find the process, how he thinks, but we got to something so simple that was so close that helped us within 20, 30 hours reach 80% of what we needed. And what was it? When you design new fabrics, you have to choose the right material, the right machines, and the right way of processing them. Of course, there are different terms in the world of fabrics, but that doesn't matter. You understand the idea, and it doesn't matter because we are not fabrics people. So we took the 30 special fabrics that he could remember. And for each of them, we told the story of the fabric. What was the business need? What is the catalog ID of the fabric? What does he remember about it? And the three things: what materials were used, specification, what machines were used, and how. Once we had this database of the 30 most interesting stories, and we called it the Fabrics Knowledge Base, we brought it to the ID department. And what happened is that starting from now, every time they came up with a new need, they looked at the catalog and within 10 minutes found something that was close enough to the answer. So sometimes, what's the lesson here? Sometimes you cannot really take all the tacit knowledge and turn it from tacit to implicit to explicit. But if you have enough prototypes, demonstrations that are codified, the organization will jump. And it will be easier tomorrow for those who are less expert to build their knowledge because you're starting to see the patterns in between. So you're not only getting solutions for these specific 30, it's easier building on them instead of building from a zero empty page when you start new development. Time is flying by, so I'll go to number 10. And I'm going back to my dear shipment lady. I promised that I will return to her. How did I capture a very important question that was the question that the CEO was really interested in within an hour? You remember that, lady? How do you do it? It's a judgment call. So I started asking questions that all of them had to do with, okay, and 80% of the time, what would you ask? Or what would you think about? And I told her, don't try to conceptualize it. Don't try to find complete answers. Just give me more typical situations. Let's speak about what we do in these typical situations. And when we started speaking, we started understanding. So we knew that we don't have the full picture, but every time we took the 80%, we said, oh, it's the 80%, so we do A or B. How do we decide? Oh, because of that and that. Okay, let's take the 20% that remain. What would be the possibilities here? Then we took the 80% out of them. Oh, that's easy. We'll do that and that and that. So at the end of the story, we had a flow. And the flow at the end of it, it had something like 5% of judgment call, but it had 95% or sort of something very close to it with definite answers how to act. So when you're not trying to be complete, but saying, okay, I will settle for a partial answer and take the easy part and then stay with the rest. And again, look for a partial answer, you'll get much better results than you think. So I shared with you here. Oh, I'm sorry. 10 tips that we use in order not to, through our methodology and through our approaches and through our tools, in order to improve the tacit knowledge capturing, and I will even say the deep tacit knowledge capturing. But I want to give you one last tip. Nowadays, I'm working on generative AI in a much deeper way. We're using it not only to prepare ourselves, but also to help running part of these activities in order to even get better and deeper and deeper. So nowadays, I'm training a specialized GPT, and I can tell you, it cannot really run yet without the knowledge manager. We need people. We're speaking about AI, human augmentation. But wonderfully, we already have positive results that when you sit with this robot, with this AI engine, knowledge manager, AI expert, within 1 hour, we start getting tacit knowledge that wouldn't pop up in any other way. So thank you very much. And I think that we are ending our session for today. So first of all, I hope that everyone has at least one thing new for them that they can take and do tomorrow. Second, I hope that you really enjoyed the session, not only learned. And third thing, next week I won't be able to join you. So Vincent will be also leading this session and also facilitating it. So enjoy everyone, and I'll see you within 2 weeks. Next week, don't miss it. I won't be there, but you please be there, and we will together meet speaking about knowledge books and leveraging the business value creation of knowledge books. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. I really
Bye-bye.
enjoyed. Thank you.
It was great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Oh, and I want to stop the recording. Here we go.